And we're back in Studio 7 as we will discuss the finalization of the NBA trade deadline and the NFL awards. Joining me on the panel tonight is Aidan, Hatton, Johnnie Brooker, and the staple, Matt Yeazel. Guys, let's just get it started. The NBA trade deadline has officially passed. One of the biggest headlines was the trade between the Philadelphia 76ers and the Brooklyn Nets involving Ben Simmons and James Harden. Thoughts on the blockbuster deal, Matt?
Well, Andrew, I can tell you I am not buying into this for Philly and James Harden. I'm just not.
Okay.
Because I have a lot of concerns about James Harden's track record. You know, we've seen a lot about how he's kind of forced his way out of the last two situations he's been in. He's played with some great players. He was with Chris Paul in Houston.
Yes.
That's probably the closest he's been to a championship was with Houston and Chris Paul. He was just with Brooklyn. Only got to play, 15 games with KD and Kyrie. But I guess I'm just not a big fan of Harden's game when it comes to thinking about winning a championship. I mean, if you're talking about, playing iso ball and, who's going to win in a one-on-one, it's hard to go against James Harden. I mean, he can cook any defender in the league, drop 35 points a night,
sure, yeah.
and that's great. But when you're talking about winning a championship, he's not who I want on my team, personally. I'm not seeing it. I feel like we've seen enough of him in good situations where he could have won something, and then suddenly he's shooting 2 for 15 from 3 in a playoff game, turning double-digit turnovers. It's just I have a lot of concerns about this from that perspective. But he could prove me wrong. He's a great player. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying from winning that's what Philly's trying to do now, is trying to win a championship this year. I don't think that's going to happen.
Some people just need a fresh start. So maybe this could be it.
But he's had a few fresh starts, though.
He's had a few fresh starts. Some really good ones, too. But, Aidan, what do you think?
I couldn't agree more with what you said, Matt, about Harden. And to compare Simmons to him as well, I think they're both mentally damaged goods at the end of the day. This trade is a swap of both guys who really in their past situations have we've seen it, with Ben Simmons, obviously in Philadelphia at the end of the postseason last year. And that's why I think this trade ultimately doesn't involve any championship-defining storyline. I think you're going to see, obviously, a big swap between Harden going to Philly and Simmons going to Brooklyn. And you just talked about Harden's perspective now playing with Embiid. Let's talk about what Brooklyn has with Ben Simmons now. As much as I don't like how he's played out this scenario at the end of last season, obviously going into this season with Doc Rivers, I think he's actually in a great spot with Brooklyn where he doesn't have to be a scorer. I think you'll see him, hopefully if he comes back from a physical and mental injury at some point, he can be effective for this Brooklyn team as they, make a playoff push.
But what about this is not championship defining, though? If Ben Simmons plays well, Kevin Durant, and you have 50% of Kyrie Irving, but you have Seth Curry as well, Andre Drummond, what about that's not championship defining? I still think that they're the favorites to come out the East.
Yeah, Brooklyn is definitely the winner of the trade to me, Andrew, and I think that's a pretty definitive answer for me because of those, alternative pieces you get with Seth Curry, not Steph. And Andre Drummond, and 2 first-round picks as well. Yeah. I just think Brooklyn's in too much of a hole right now, and I think that mental imagery of what they went through last year, losing to the hometown Milwaukee Bucks here in town the way they did, I just don't see them climbing all the way back from an 11-game losing streak, which we just saw.
Andrew, you said 50% of Kyrie Irving. That's all you need to say when
Yeah.
you're talking about championship contenders. I mean,
guess.
look, KD, great player. You're telling me they're going to carry this team all the way to a championship without Kyrie?
I think so.
A 7-game series, Kyrie's playing 3, depending on the other team's city.
Yeah, right.
Like, I mean, hey, if the Bucks in Brooklyn play in playoffs, let's talk to the city of Milwaukee about vaccine mandate. I mean, I'm just saying, like, you can't depend on them right now, and you can't depend on Ben Simmons either. But I think in theory, it is a good situation for Simmons.
But you can count on the greatest scorer in NBA history in Kevin Durant.
You
can't tell me he's not going to lead that team.
Preach.
Remember last season against the Milwaukee Bucks, if his foot was an inch smaller,
what about it?
they would have won.
If his shoe size was,
that's it.
Whew.
Speaking of shoe, look at Aidan's. Look at his.
Oh my gosh, those kicks are awesome.
Camera can look.
I wish we could get some camera on those shoes. Look at that. But anyway, so we're talking about the East. We're staying in the East. Who do you think is the best team in the East? Does the conference still run through the Milwaukee Bucks? We'll start with you, Johnny.
I think it does run through them right now, but at the same time, the East is so close right now. Like the Brooklyn Nets, they are the 8th seed, but there's only 7 games splitting them from first place to that 8th seed. So I do think it does run through Milwaukee, but you can't count out Brooklyn. They are 1-9 in their last 10, but the real season doesn't start until the playoffs begins. Yeah. So you're gonna tell me you're gonna beat Kevin Durant 4 times.
It's tough.
Yeah. So I
but
do
they
think
did it last year.
They did.
They did.
They did it last
but
year.
to who? To the champions, Milwaukee. So
Yeah.
if there's a team that's
Okay.
gonna beat them, it'll be Milwaukee, and not Chicago.
Aidan, I hope you're not going to say what team I think you're going to say, but let's continue.
I will not say my hometown Boston Celtics.
Okay,
Thank you.
I think it's the other green team. Obviously, it stays through Milwaukee. I still do think that because the Milwaukee Bucks are 23-6 when Giannis Antetokounmpo, Chris Middleton, Andrew Holiday
That's cute.
all play
That's cute.
together. And I
Thank
think
That's cute.
obviously they're 12-16 when one of them does not play. But when you talk about health in terms of what Brooklyn's going through right now and what we've seen throughout the last NBA season and even this year, still going through the pandemic, obviously, I think that's going to play a huge role. And when Milwaukee is healthy, I think the Eastern Conference still goes through them.
Look, just because Matt is on the panel does not mean that you have to make him
I
happy.
Love it. I love it. I love it. And look, injuries obviously is a concern for every team. We're not saying the Bucks are the only team that have had injury issues, but I'm liking how this team's shaping out right now around the big three when they are healthy. We saw a few trades bringing in Sergio. They haven't had Brook Lopez all year, an anchor
Correct.
down low.
Yep.
You know, they've had a lot of small lineups with Bobby Portis playing center, and that's fine every now and then, but you really need a big center to control the paint defensively and to be able to shoot a little bit. They brought in Serge Ibaka. They still have a couple buyout spots. Maybe bring in Goran Dragic. I'm really liking how this Bucks team comes together when they're all healthy. When those three are healthy, for the most part, they look like an elite team. They look like the team we saw in the playoffs last year. But in general, I just think the Bucks they may not be the 1 seed right now. They're not. I believe they're the 5 seed.
They're not even the 2 seed or 3.
It don't matter.
What was that record you said that? What are they?
23-6.
23-6. When the Chicago Bulls are healthy, do you know what they are?
Oh,
They're undefeated. They're undefeated. Okay.
Well, that's the asterisk.
And, well,
When healthy.
I won't even talk.
Injuries the most.
You guys already know what my stance is on the Chicago Bulls. I think that they're a huge threat, but we haven't even talked about South Beach, Miami. We haven't talked about them. They are a very big threat to the Milwaukee Bucks because they're one of the teams that will run a zone. And when you run a zone, I think that could, Milwaukee might have some shooters. I don't know how they'll do in the playoffs, but when there's a zone with Giannis, they can shut that down. Their defense is great. Marquette alum Jimmy Butler, he's going to be running the show there. I think they're very impressive, but Chicago's undefeated. And the Brooklyn Nets, we just talked about the Brooklyn Nets. So I don't know. And
Brooklyn is a big what if, though. I just think they're the biggest what if.
What if for what, though? What if for what?
If Kyrie can even play, if Ben Simmons is available. Just availability is the biggest question for Brooklyn right now.
He's going to play.
And, how many games are those three going to have together to, get a connection going before the playoffs start?
But don't you think Brooklyn would know if Ben Simmons was not going to play or not? That had to be in the conversations when the general manager was on the phone. Will Ben Simmons play this season?
I'm sure Philly thought he was going to come back and play, and then
Philly does not want him to play. That's a death sentence for Ben Simmons. I don't think Philly wants to see him play. Ben Simmons doesn't even want to shoot the ball. So yeah. I think you got a point, but we'll skip over that. But anyway, the Green Bay Packers were staying in Wisconsin. Their quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, wins his 4th MVP honors at the NFL Awards ceremony this past week. TJ Watt of the Pittsburgh Steelers and Cooper Kupp of the Los Angeles Rams are also award winners. What are everyone's thoughts on this year's award winners? Agree, disagree? Johnny, Brooker, we'll start with you.
So for MVP, Aaron Rodgers, that's a given. Defensive Player of the Year, TJ Watt. I mean, he tied the sack record with the man, Michael Strahan, who played for this great franchise right here. So that's a given. But for Offensive Player of the Year, Cooper Kupp, I think he's rightfully so because he led the league in 3 categories. But he better thank God for his coach and his general manager for bringing in Matthew Stafford, because you need to be a great wide receiver. I think you need a great quarterback as well. But also because they brought in this man.
Why would they need to thank Odell?
You're going against one of the greatest wide receivers in practice every single day. That's motivation right there to succeed.
But even before he
Oh,
came,
my goodness.
he was still running the show.
Yes, but then think about it. You got Matt right here. You got Aidan. That's making you want to do better right here.
Especially,
Right.
Aiden's making me want to dress better. Matt's making me want to just roast Milwaukee all the time.
They say the saying says iron sharpens iron.
Iron sharpens iron.
Robert Woods is not Odell Beckham. Van Jefferson is not Odell.
Well,
All right.
you just brought in a Giants jersey.
And
And we don't even have Kristen, and somehow New York always
exactly.
pops in. Aiden, tell us more.
New York always makes an impact on us.
Every time.
In some way, shape, or form. I'm also in agreement on those three. I think Rodgers only had 4 interceptions this season. That has to be the kicker for the MVP. In terms of TJ Watt, you just mentioned Strahan's record. He actually played a game less, even with a 17-game season, because he missed 2 games with injuries. So that's equally as impressive, if not more. And then finally, with Cooper Kupp, a guy, he deserved that Offensive Player of the Year award. A guy who I wanted to see, obviously coming from the University of Wisconsin, was Jonathan Taylor of the Colts, but his team faltered the last few weeks of the year. Obviously, rooting for a running back to win that award would have been cool, but congratulations to Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, Taylor was in MVP conversations earlier on in the season, but Cooper Kupp arguably just had the best wide receiver season ever. I mean, these awards, don't factor in the postseason, so I guess his Super Bowl MVP award doesn't necessarily factor into that. But still, winning the Triple Crown, even with the extra game, easily the fantasy MVP, if not the regular MVP. Yeah. But TJ Watt, last year, I think should have won Defensive Player of the Year, came back, had an incredible season.
All right. Well, thank you so much for this great discussion. I kind of disagree, but we will say that for another time. Anyway, thank you so much for the great discussion. We're out of time, but be sure to tune in next week for all our coverage of Marquette sports and more. Once again, I'm Andrew Amouzou. Good night, Marquette.